Excuse me, ma'am.
Yes, officer.
What is it you think you're doing here?
I'm dumping trash out.
That's illegal. This is private property. You can't be using this dumpster for your trash.
Oh, no, it's okay. My office is right here. It's not illegal. I have an office here, sir.
Your office is here. You work, and you work here.
Correct. I'm an attorney at law. That's correct. Yes.
You're an attorney.
Yes, sir. Do you need a business card or anything?
Yeah,
Need services?
yes. I need proof of this.
Would you like services or anything, or why do you need my business?
I would like to see proof that you're an attorney, because this is private property. You can't be throwing trash out there. You're breaking the law.
Okay, I would love to show you my business card. That's no problem.
What you're about to witness is a police officer who saw a black woman taking out trash behind an office building and decided she must be committing a crime, despite her business card, despite her explanation, despite every piece of evidence proving she worked there. For 5 agonizing minutes, he escalated a non-existent situation while his body camera captured every word. That footage would cost him his badge, trigger a federal investigation, and expose a pattern of racial profiling that should have ended his career years earlier. This is the story of what happens when bias meets authority, and how one attorney's knowledge of the law became her shield against harassment that could have turned deadly.
1019.
Here you go, sir. Linda Jones, attorney at law, located right at this office address.
I see the Linda Jones, but I don't see the address here.
Sir, if you flip the card over, please. Thank you. Is there anything else I can help you with, sir? Because the sun is...
I still don't see the address.
Sir, here's the address here, please. And that's my name. Is there anything else that you need to verify that, sir? I'm trying to cooperate here.
Ma'am, I'll ask the questions. You're breaking the law right now.
Actually, I'm an attorney. I know my rights, and I'm not breaking the law. As I stated, sir, I'm a tenant at this office location.
Okay, this card doesn't prove any of that. I need to see your ID.
You don't need to see my ID, sir. I just gave you my business card.
Ma'am, don't make this any more difficult than it has to be.
Address.
There's no need to be confrontational.
Nobody's being confrontational, sir.
The sun was brutal that Tuesday afternoon in Charlotte, North Carolina, the kind of August heat that turned asphalt soft and made the air shimmer. Linda Jones had been in court all morning arguing a motion to suppress, and she was exhausted in that specific way that comes from 3 hours of intellectual combat with a prosecutor who didn't know when to concede. She'd won. The judge had granted her motion, and her client, a 22-year-old kid who'd been stopped for driving suspiciously, would walk free because the search had been illegal from the start. Victory tasted sweet, but it didn't erase the weariness. Back at her office in the Eastway Professional Center, she kicked off her heels the moment she walked through the door, wiggling her toes against the carpet. The office was small, just her, a paralegal and a receptionist, but it was hers. 5 years of building her practice from nothing, taking the cases other attorneys wouldn't touch, defending people who looked like her and got chewed up by a system that assumed their guilt. The trash bag sitting by her desk had been there since Friday. She'd been too busy to take it out, and it was starting to smell like old coffee grounds and the remains of last week's lunch. She grabbed it with a sigh, slipped her feet back into her heels, and headed toward the back door. The dumpster was shared by all the tenants in the building, 3 other small businesses, all of them paying rent to the same management company, all of them with the legal right to use the waste disposal services included in their lease. Linda had been dumping her office trash here twice a week for 5 years. It was routine, mindless, nothing. Until it became something. Before we continue, where are you watching from? If this is your first time here, you need to hit that subscribe button right now. Stories like this get buried every single day because people watch, feel something, and then scroll away without taking action. Don't be that person. Subscribe. It takes 2 seconds and it makes sure the truth doesn't stay hidden. Officer Derek Coleman had been with the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department for 6 years. At 31, he was young enough to still have that rookie eagerness, that conviction that he was making his community safer with every shift. What he called proactive policing, his personnel file called something else, a pattern of stops that disproportionately targeted people of color in areas he didn't think they belonged. He'd been driving past the Eastway Professional Center when he saw her, a black woman in business attire walking toward a dumpster with a trash bag. His brain made a series of calculations so fast he barely registered them as thoughts. Black woman, business district, dumpster doesn't fit, must investigate. He didn't consider that she might work there. Didn't think about the professional clothes, the confident stride, the fact that she was in broad daylight doing something completely ordinary. He just saw what his bias told him to see, someone who didn't belong doing something that must be wrong. He pulled into the parking lot and activated his body camera. Department policy required it for all citizen contacts, and Coleman was religious about following that rule. He believed the camera protected him, captured his version of events, proved he was just doing his job. He had no idea that camera was about to capture him destroying his own career. Linda was lifting the trash bag toward the dumpster when she heard the voice behind her. "Excuse me, ma'am." She turned, and her stomach did that familiar drop that happened every time she saw a police uniform approaching her. Not fear exactly, though there was always some of that, more like exhaustion, because she knew, even before he opened his mouth, that this wasn't going to be a friendly good afternoon. "Yes, officer," she kept her voice neutral, professional, years of practice. "What is it you think you're doing here?" The phrasing alone told her everything. Not "can I help you" or "do you work here," but "what do you think you're doing," like she was a child caught somewhere she shouldn't be. "I'm dumping trash," she gestured to the bag in her hand, to the dumpster, to the obvious reality of the situation. "My office is right here." "That's illegal." His voice had that flat certainty cops get when they've decided you're guilty. "This is private property, you can't be using this dumpster for your trash." Linda felt something hot and familiar rise in her chest. She dealt with this kind of assumption her entire life, in stores where security followed her, in restaurants where hostesses were surprised she could afford the bill, in professional settings where people assumed she was the secretary, not the attorney. But this was different. This was her office, her building, her dumpster. "Oh no, it's okay." She kept her voice pleasant, giving him an out, an easy exit from the mistake he was making. "My office is right here, it's not illegal, I have an office in this building." "Your office is here," he said it like she'd claimed to be the Queen of England. "You work here." "I'm an attorney at law." She let the title hang in the air, watched his expression shift not to belief but to something more complicated. "That's correct." "You're an attorney," flat disbelief. "Do you need a business card or anything, services?" The condescension in his voice made her jaw tighten. He was mocking her now, challenging her claim, because apparently a black woman taking out trash couldn't possibly be a lawyer. "Yes, I need proof of this," he continued. "I need to see proof that you're an attorney because this is private property. You can't be throwing trash out there, you're breaking the law." "Okay," Linda made herself breathe slowly, deliberately. "I would love to show you my business card, that's no problem." She walked back inside her office. He followed close behind, hand near his weapon like she might make a run for it, and grabbed a card from her desk. Her paralegal Marcus looked up with concern, but she shook her head slightly. "Not now." Back outside, she handed Coleman the card with fingers that wanted to shake but didn't. She'd argued in front of hostile judges, faced down prosecutors who underestimated her, cross-examined lying cops. She could handle this. "Here you go, sir. Linda Jones, attorney at law, located right at this office address." Coleman examined the card like it might be counterfeit. "I see the Linda Jones, but I don't see the address here." "If you flip the card over, please." Type harassment in the comments if you think Coleman was racially profiling her. I'm watching the comment section, and if you're silent now, you're part of the problem. Speak up. Let the algorithm know this matters. Your voice counts, use it. He flipped it over with deliberate slowness, like he was hoping the address wouldn't be there, wouldn't match, would give him a reason to escalate this further. "Is there anything else I can help you with, sir?" Linda's voice was getting tighter despite her efforts to stay calm. "Because the sun is." "I still don't see the address." He was lying, or he couldn't read, or he was so committed to his assumption that he literally couldn't process information that contradicted it. "Sir, here's the address." She pointed directly at the printed text. "Right here, and that's my name. Is there anything else you need to verify, sir? I'm trying to cooperate here." "Ma'am, I'll ask the questions. You're breaking the law right now." And there it was, the shift from questioning to accusation, from investigation to confrontation. Linda felt her attorney instincts kick in fully now, that hyper-aware state where she cataloged every word, every action, building her case. Actually, I'm an attorney, I know my rights and I'm not breaking the law. As I stated, sir, I'm an attorney at this office location. This card doesn't prove any of that, I need to see your ID. You don't need to see my ID, sir, I just gave you my business card. His face flushed red. Ma'am, don't make this any more difficult than it has to be, there's no need to be confrontational. Confrontational? The word cops always used when you knew your rights and refused to surrender them. Linda had heard it 100 times in her practice, seen it weaponized against her clients. Now it was being used against her, and the irony was so sharp it could cut. I'm not being confrontational, sir. She kept her voice level, professional, lawyer perfect. You're being incredibly aggressive. All you're doing is escalating the situation, and there's no need for any of this. I'm escalating the situation, his voice rose. I've asked you 3 times now, I need to see your ID to verify the business card. Linda made a calculation. She could refuse, she had every legal right to refuse, but refusal would give him an excuse to arrest her for obstruction. Would put her in handcuffs in front of her office, would create a scene her white colleagues would never face. So she pulled out her driver's license with hands that were steady only through years of courtroom discipline. Okay, I'll do that for you, but I don't have to, I want to make sure you know that. Coleman took her license like he'd won something, examining it with theatrical skepticism. Linda watched him, watched the way his eyes moved between her face and the photo, between the address and her business card, looking for discrepancies that would justify his suspicion. This is my name, she said, pointing to her license, to verify the business card and the office address, sir. This is not illegal dumping, once again. But the address is different on your license than it is on the business card. She closed her eyes briefly, summoning patience from somewhere deep. Because that's a business location, sir, that's not my home address. Of course, the addresses were different. Why would her business card have her home address? That's not how business cards worked, and he knew it. He had to know it. But he was grasping now, looking for any reason to maintain his position, any justification for the stop that had stopped making sense the moment she showed him proof. Yeah, this whole thing just seems very suspicious. Coleman was backing toward his patrol car, her ID still in his hand. I'll be right back, I need to run this ID. You don't need to run my ID, sir. Linda's voice sharpened, lawyer mode fully engaged now. You don't need to, I'm an attorney, like I said. That'll be against your jurisdiction if you're trying to run my driver's license. You and I both know that, or I can tell you that right now, that's illegal what you're doing. You just illegally took my ID because you have no reason to legally stop me. I gave you my ID voluntarily. I did not have to, once again. Coleman stopped mid-stride. She'd hit a nerve. He knew she was right about the illegal seizure, knew a judge would throw out anything that came from this stop, knew he was on thin ice legally. But his ego wouldn't let him back down. Ma'am, you're breaking the law, you're illegally dumping, your addresses do not match up. Yes, they do, Linda's patience was fracturing, they do match up. Well then, you should have no problem with me running it then, if you are who you say you are. You don't need to run my ID, sir. I told you again, I'm a lawyer. This is my office address. I've proven that with my business card and my driver's license. This is not illegal. You have no reason to stop me. Well then, you should have no reason for me to run your ID if you are in fact a lawyer and this is your property. Because from where I stand, you're illegally dumping trash into a dumpster. The circular logic would have been funny if it wasn't so dangerous. Linda felt her heart rate picking up, adrenaline flooding her system. This was how situations escalated. This was how people got arrested for nothing, charged with resisting arrest when they'd done nothing to resist, hurt when they tried to assert rights that cops didn't want to acknowledge. If we continue with this, sir, you're going to get sued. She let the words drop like stones. Is that what you want, officer? She read his badge number aloud, slowly, clearly. Badge 2322, you really want to continue this conversation with me knowing that I'm an attorney at law? Something flickered in Coleman's expression, not quite fear but uncertainty. Maybe the realization that he'd picked the wrong person to harass, that she wasn't going to cry or comply or make this easy for him. I mean, you haven't proven that you're an attorney, he said, but his voice had lost some of its certainty. A business card saying attorney doesn't and the ID matching that doesn't do it for you? Or do you want to keep going down this rabbit hole, officer? Have you or someone you know experienced something like this? The comments are a safe space to share, but here's the thing: if you stay silent, nothing changes. Thousands of people will watch this video, feel outraged for 15 seconds, and then forget about it. Don't let that be you. Comment, share, make noise. Coleman was trapped now. He'd escalated too far to retreat gracefully, but he didn't have legal grounds to escalate further. Linda could see the calculations happening behind his eyes, the same calculations she'd seen in cops on the witness stand when they realized their story didn't hold up. "Okay, ma'am, this could just be so simple. All you need to do is give me your ID and your business card back." "I'm not letting you run anything. I don't have to let you run anything. Maybe you need to go read into your law books, ma'am." She threw his own condescension back at him instead of just the academy. "If you weren't breaking the law, you're going to get sued, sir. This is harassment now, because you're on my private property as a tenant and you're trying to make me. Call whoever you need to call because you're wrong. You're absolutely wrong." Linda pulled out her phone. Her hand was shaking now, not from fear but from rage, from the sheer exhaustion of having to defend her right to exist in a space she'd earned. "I don't know if it's racism. I don't know what you have going on, a bad day. I'm not sure, sir, but you need to go." "None of that is relevant to what's going on here." "It's very relevant because you're sitting here harassing me at my workplace while I'm taking out my trash where I pay for my office space." "None of that has been proven," but his voice had gone flat, defensive. "I do have an ongoing investigation right now. I just gave you my business card. I've given you my business card. I've showed you my ID and verified that's the name. This is my office. Would you like to come inside?" The offer hung in the air. Linda was calling his bluff, inviting him to see her office, her nameplate on the door, her law degree on the wall, all the proof he claimed he needed but didn't really want. Coleman's face went through several colors. He'd painted himself into a corner and they both knew it. "Okay, ma'am." His voice had changed completely, from aggressive to placating, from accusatory to conciliatory. "I'm going to let you off on a warning." The words were so absurd that Linda almost laughed. Let her off on a warning? For what? For being black and taking out trash? "You have no choice but to let me off on a warning," she said coldly, "because you need a warning yourself. Keep it going. I have an ongoing investigation I need to tend to." "I bet you do. We're going to leave this as a warning today." "Bet?" Linda's voice dripped with contempt. "That sounds great. You have a great day." Coleman retreated to his patrol car like a dog with its tail between its legs, and Linda stood there in the parking lot, trash bag still in her hand, body still thrumming with adrenaline. Marcus appeared at her elbow. "Boss, what the hell just happened?" "Racism happened and stupidity, and I recorded every word of it." Linda didn't post the video immediately. She sat in her office that evening after Marcus had gone home and watched it 3 times. Her phone's recording quality wasn't great, but the audio was clear. Every word Coleman had said, every escalation, every refusal to accept evidence, every implication that she was lying about being an attorney at her own office. And then she pulled the formal complaint form from the Charlotte-Mecklenburg PD website and started typing. She'd filed police complaints before on behalf of clients, armed with evidence and witness statements and legal arguments. But filing one for herself felt different, personal, vulnerable, like admitting that even with all her education, all her professional success, all her knowledge of the law, she was still just another black woman who could be harassed with impunity. The complaint was methodical, detailed, lawyer-perfect. Complainant: Linda Marie Jones, attorney at law. Officer: Derek Coleman, badge 2322. Date time: August 15, 2024, approximately 3:45 p.m. Location: Eastway Professional Center, 4721 Eastway Drive. Incident description: Officer Coleman approached me while I was disposing of office trash in the dumpster provided for all tenants of my office building. Despite my immediate explanation that I was an attorney working in the building, Officer Coleman accused me of illegal dumping and demanded identification. I provided my business card showing my name and office address. Officer Coleman claimed this was insufficient proof and demanded my driver's license. Though I was under no legal obligation to provide ID for a non-criminal encounter, I complied to de-escalate the situation. Officer Coleman then claimed my driver's license and business card didn't match because, as I explained, one listed my business address and the other my home address. This is standard practice for all professionals. Officer Coleman then stated he would run my ID despite having no legal basis for a criminal investigation. When I informed him this would be an illegal seizure, he became defensive and accusatory, repeatedly claiming I was breaking the law despite all evidence to the contrary. Throughout the interaction, Officer Coleman refused to accept proof of my employment, demanded ID without reasonable suspicion of any crime, threat to run my ID illegally, escalated a non-encounter into a confrontational stop, demonstrated apparent racial bias in assuming a black woman at an office building must be committing a crime. The interaction lasted approximately 5 minutes and was recorded on my personal phone and Officer Coleman's body camera. I am requesting full investigation of Officer Coleman's conduct, review of his body camera footage, review of his complaint history, appropriate disciplinary action, bias training for relevant officers. She hit submit at 11:47 p.m. and then finally posted the phone video to social media with a simple caption. This is what it's like to be a black attorney in 2024, harassed for taking out my own office trash. If you've made it this far, you're part of the solution, but watching isn't enough. Hit that subscribe button, share this video with someone who needs to see it, because here's the uncomfortable truth: if you don't spread this story, who will? The algorithm buries content that doesn't get engagement. Your click determines whether this reaches 100 people or 100,000. Choose wisely. The video went viral overnight. By morning, it had 800,000 views. By noon, 2.3 million. Local news picked it up, then national outlets. Attorney harassed by cop while taking out office trash ran on every major network. The Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department's phone lines were flooded. Their social media pages exploded with comments. Linda's law office voicemail was full of messages, some supportive, some hateful, some from other black professionals sharing their own stories of being profiled in professional spaces. Captain Denise Washington was assigned to investigate the complaint. She was a 20-year veteran, one of the highest-ranking black women in the department, and she'd seen enough of these cases to recognize the pattern before she even pulled Coleman's file. 14 citizen complaints in 6 years. 11 involved allegations of racial profiling or discriminatory treatment. In every case, the complainant was a person of color, and in every case, Coleman claimed he'd had reasonable suspicion that turned out to be nothing. The body camera footage made Washington physically ill. She watched Coleman approach Linda, saw the immediate assumption of wrongdoing, heard the refusal to accept proof, witnessed the escalation over nothing. But what really struck her was Linda's composure. Her knowledge of the law, her refusal to be intimidated, her clear, repeated statements about what Coleman was doing wrong. This wasn't a confused citizen who didn't understand their rights. This was an attorney who knew exactly what was happening and was documenting it in real time. Washington pulled Coleman's previous body camera footage from his last 10 stops and felt her stomach sink lower with each clip. There was the white college kid with expired tags. Coleman had let him off with a friendly warning and a joke about forgetting things during finals week. 2 days later, there was the black man with the same violation, and Coleman had him spread against the car within 30 seconds, demanding consent to search while backup units rolled in like he'd stopped a fugitive. There was the elderly white woman who couldn't find her insurance card. No problem, ma'am, just bring it to the station when you find it. And then the young Latina mother in the exact same situation, except Coleman had her in tears on the side of the road while he called for a tow truck and threatened to cite her for every possible violation. The pattern wasn't just obvious, it was undeniable, and it had been happening for 6 years while supervisors signed off on his evaluations with comments like proactive and thorough. Washington wrote her report that night and she didn't pull any punches. Officer Coleman has demonstrated a clear pattern of racially discriminatory enforcement. The incident with Attorney Jones represents not an isolated mistake but the predictable result of bias that this department has failed to address. Immediate termination is recommended. Coleman was placed on administrative leave within 48 hours. The police union sent him a lawyer, some guy named Mitchell who smelled like cigarette smoke and desperation, but even Mitchell watched the body camera footage and winced. "You really couldn't see the address on the card?" Mitchell asked, rewinding the footage for the third time. "It was small print," Coleman muttered, and she was being evasive. "Derek, she showed you a business card, explained she was an attorney, showed you her ID, explained the address difference, and offered to let you see inside her office. None of that is evasive. That's a woman bending over backward to comply with a stop that never should have happened in the first place. I had reasonable suspicion that." "Of what? Of illegal dumping? She was taking out office trash at her office. You stopped her because you saw a black woman and assumed she was doing something wrong." Mitchell closed his laptop with a snap. "I can try to negotiate the termination down to resignation, keep your record cleaner, but Derek, you're done. This department can't save you from this." Coleman sat in his living room for 3 days watching his life implode on social media. His name was everywhere, his badge number, screenshots from the body camera with his face circled in red. Comment sections full of people sharing their own stories of being profiled by cops who looked just like him, thought just like him, ruined lives just like he was about to ruin his own. His wife stopped sleeping in their bedroom. She'd seen the video, heard the tone in his voice, watched him refuse to believe a woman who'd done everything right. "Is this who you are?" she'd asked him, and he'd had no answer. The termination hearing was quick. Coleman's union rep tried to argue procedural issues, tried to claim the stop was within policy guidelines, tried to suggest Linda had been uncooperative. Chief Harold Pierce listened to 5 minutes of that nonsense before cutting him off. "I've watched the video. The entire department has watched the video. Half the country has watched the video. Officer Coleman racially profiled an attorney taking out her office trash, refused to accept evidence that proved she worked there, threatened an illegal records check, and then tried to justify it all by claiming she was suspicious. This is textbook discrimination, and I will not defend it." Coleman was fired on September 3, 2024, 19 days after he'd stopped Linda in that parking lot. His termination letter cited racial bias, abuse of authority, false detention, and conduct unbecoming an officer. The state's Law Enforcement Standards Board voted unanimously to revoke his certification. He would never be a cop again anywhere. But Linda wasn't done. She filed a federal civil rights lawsuit 3 weeks later, and when Coleman's attorney suggested settlement, Linda's response was ice cold. "We're going to trial. The public needs to see this." The lawsuit laid out everything: the illegal stop, the racial profiling, the pattern of discriminatory enforcement that the department had enabled by ignoring complaints. Linda was suing Coleman personally and the Charlotte-Mecklenburg PD for failing to supervise an officer they knew had problems. Her damages claim was $750,000, not because she needed the money but because the number needed to hurt, needed to make departments think twice about keeping officers like Coleman on the street. The trial took 4 days. Linda testified about what it felt like to be questioned about belonging at her own office, to have her credentials doubted, to fear that one wrong word might escalate into violence. Her voice cracked when she described the moment Coleman's hand moved toward his weapon, not overtly threatening, but the implication clear. "I'm an attorney," she told the jury, her composure perfect except for the slight tremor in her hands. "I know the law, I know my rights, I knew what he was doing was illegal from the first moment, and I still felt afraid, because knowledge doesn't protect you from a bullet. A law degree doesn't make you safe when someone with a gun has decided you're guilty." The jury watched the body camera footage in its entirety, all 5 minutes of Coleman's escalation, all 5 minutes of Linda's patient, professional responses, all 5 minutes of a man who couldn't accept that a black woman might belong in a professional building. They deliberated for 90 minutes. The verdict was unanimous. Coleman had violated Linda's Fourth Amendment rights through illegal detention based on racial discrimination. The Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department had failed in its duty to supervise and discipline an officer with a known pattern of bias. Damages: $520,000. $270,000 from Coleman personally, $250,000 from the department, plus mandatory reforms including independent review of all discrimination complaints and quarterly bias audits of officer stop data. Coleman didn't have $270,000. His house went into foreclosure. His marriage ended 3 months after the verdict. His ex-wife later gave an interview saying she couldn't reconcile the man she'd married with the man she'd seen on that video. his kids stopped calling. He tried to get security jobs, but background checks killed every opportunity. Fired from police for racial discrimination wasn't something employers overlooked. He ended up working overnight shifts at a warehouse in South Carolina, making $13 an hour, living in a studio apartment, his entire life reduced to the consequences of 5 minutes when he'd let his assumptions override evidence. Linda used half her settlement money to establish the Professional Defense Fund, providing free legal representation to Black professionals who face discrimination in workplace or business settings. She'd lived the nightmare of having credentials questioned, authority doubted, presence challenged. She knew how isolating it felt, how exhausting it was to constantly prove you belonged in spaces you'd earned. The fund handled 43 cases in its first year, doctors questioned by hospital security, executives stopped by building guards, professors challenged by campus police, every case a variation on the same theme, Black excellence meeting white skepticism. Charlotte Mecklenburg PD underwent massive reforms under the federal consent decree. Captain Washington was promoted to deputy chief and put in charge of the overhaul. She implemented early warning systems that flagged officers with patterns of discriminatory stops before they became Coleman-level disasters. She created civilian review boards with real authority to investigate and discipline. She made body camera footage public by default rather than by request. And she used Linda's case in every training session for new recruits. The full body camera footage, unedited, then she'd pause it at key moments. Here's where he sees her and makes an assumption based on race. Here's where she provides proof and he refuses to believe it. Here's where he escalates instead of de-escalating. Here's where he threatens illegal action to justify his ego. Every single moment was a choice. Every choice was wrong. And all of it was preventable if he just asked himself one question: what evidence do I have that a crime is occurring? The answer, of course, had been none, just bias wearing a badge. Thank you for watching until the end. That alone puts you in the top 5% of viewers, but don't stop there. Subscribe, hit the bell, share this in your group chats, post it on your socials, because tomorrow someone else is going to need this story, and if you didn't share it, they'll never find it. Don't let this be another video you watched and forgot. Take action right now. 3 years later, Linda still practiced law from that same office. She'd added a second attorney and expanded to the office next door. Business was good. Word spread that she was the lawyer who'd sued a cop and won, and that reputation brought clients who needed someone who understood what it meant to fight power with knowledge. She still took out her own trash, usually around the same time on Tuesday afternoons. Sometimes she'd pause in that parking lot, remembering the heat of that August day, the weight of Coleman's suspicion, the cold calculation she'd had to make about compliance versus safety. But mostly she thought about the phone calls she got from other attorneys, other professionals, other Black people who'd been stopped, questioned, challenged in spaces they'd earned the right to occupy. The ones who said, "I saw your video and it gave me the courage to fight back," or "I recorded my encounter because you recorded yours," or "I filed a complaint because you filed yours." That's what the video had become, not just evidence of one cop's racism, but permission for others to document, to resist, to demand better. Every view, every share, every comment was another person learning that they didn't have to accept being treated like criminals for existing while Black. Coleman was still in South Carolina, still working warehouse shifts, still bitter about the cancel culture that had destroyed his life over one mistake. He gave occasional interviews to right-wing podcasts, claiming he was the real victim, that political correctness had made policing impossible. Nobody bought it. The video was still there, still playing, still showing exactly who he was and what he'd done. Meanwhile, the Professional Defense Fund had handled 127 cases over 3 years. They'd won or settled 114 of them. They'd recovered over $3.2 million in damages from employers, security companies, and police departments that had enabled discrimination. And they'd used every case as another brick in the wall of evidence that bias wasn't abstract. It was measurable, documentable, and actionable. Linda never planned to become a civil rights icon. She just wanted to take out her trash without being interrogated. But that's how change happens sometimes, not through grand gestures, but through ordinary people who refuse to accept that harassment is normal, who document injustice when it happens, who fight back with the tools they have. Her tool had been knowledge of the law and a cell phone camera. Coleman's tool had been a badge and a gun and the assumption that he could question anyone who looked suspicious to him. In the end, knowledge won, evidence won, truth won. But the fight wasn't over. Somewhere right now, another Linda was being questioned about belonging somewhere she had every right to be. Another Coleman was making assumptions based on skin color rather than evidence. Another confrontation was being recorded, another complaint was being filed, another battle was beginning. The difference now was that people like Linda had shown it was possible to win. What was the most shocking part of this story for you? Drop it in the comments. I read every single one. And remember, document everything. Know your rights, and never let someone else's assumptions about who you are override the evidence of what you've achieved. Until next time, stay vigilant, stay informed, and never stop fighting for the respect you've earned.